Well, as I mentioned earlier, thank you so much for making time to be on this call. I know there's other things that you could be doing, but instead you're here with me, and we're all here with one another, and that is really, really cool. So this session, session number 1 for this online course, Self-Publishing for Ministry Professionals. Session 1 is called How to Discover Your Why and Broaden Your Vision. And basically what I'm going to do is just go through some information, some things to think about. You might want to have a pen and paper ready to jot down some things, or you can just kind of listen along if you're listening on the phone, or you can follow along on computer. Okay, got a message there. We're having some audio issues here. Someone can't hear. So we'll have to go back and fix that later. Okay. All right, folks, let's jump in here. A couple of things before we get started. Number 1 is I really would like you to join the Facebook group. You can go to facebook.com/groups/self-publishing for ministry professionals. And that is a Facebook group that I set up actually 2 or 3 months ago, but people have been continuously joining it. So make sure and join that group. That's where really most of the great learning is going to take place, because that's going to give you a chance to ask questions, for us to kind of encourage one another in our writing journeys, and just kind of form a community of ministry professionals who want to use our writing skills and our writing passion to make a difference for the kingdom of God. So that's something I'm really excited about. So if you're just watching the presentations or listening to them and you don't join the Facebook group, I think you're going to miss a really important part of the overall thrust of what we're doing here. So that's one thing. Make sure and join the Facebook group. Second of all, you can access the replays and the resources for the course. So for instance, if you want to rewatch this, or if you miss next week or something like that, if you miss any of the sessions, you can go to my website, kentsanders.net/selfpubcourse. And that's already set up, so you can actually go in there right now if you want to. It is password protected, and the password is selfpub2016. Selfpub2016. And if you have any trouble getting into that, let me know, and I'll be happy to figure that out for you. All right, let's jump in. Tonight's topic in this self-publishing course is the topic of purpose. And here's our learning objectives for tonight. And I really want to structure this like an actual course. I don't at all want to make it just here's a random topic and here's a random topic. I want to make this really very much as much like a college course as I can. Of course, without the gobs and gobs of homework, and there's no grade, of course. But aside from that, I want to make sure we have some learning objectives established so that we know where we're going, and also to kind of keep things focused. When you're talking about a topic like writing, or even kind of a smaller topic like self-publishing, you can go 100 different directions or more. So I want to keep this very focused so that we don't get off track and that we can hopefully get some momentum going. Here's our learning objectives. Number 1 is to articulate why you want to write and or self-publish a book. Wow, this is a self-publishing class and I've already got a typo there. That's crazy. That should say why you want to write and or self-publish a book. That's what I get for typing these up late at night, I guess. Number 1. Number 2 is to understand the difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing, and why self-publishing is a great option for most writers. And then number 3, to discover your purpose. Oops. Hold on one second. We got a couple people we got to mute. Okay, there's one. Give me 1 second here. Okay, good. So objective number 3 is to discover your purpose as a writer and how it's connected to your overall life purpose. And that's probably the most important thing we're going to talk about tonight. First of all, I want to tackle a few other things before we jump into the more purpose kind of topic. Here's the outline for tonight. Number 1 is I want to share with you a little bit about myself so that you know who I am. I think I know most of you, but a few of you I don't know. So this will give you a little bit of a refresher on who I am. And for those who don't know me at all, this will just kind of help you to understand who this guy is who's doing this class. Number 2, I want us to think through why write a book in the first place. Number 3 is why specifically self-publish a book as opposed to trying to seek a traditional publisher. And one of the things we'll discover in that section is that neither is right or wrong. It's just, what are your goals in writing, and can self-publishing help that more, or traditional publishing? Both are great. I've done both actually, and they're great, but they do, what route you go does depend on what your goals are. And number 4, I want us to think through how to discover your why as a writer. So let's chat for just a second about me. Wow, that sounds really egotistical. Let's chat for a second about me. But for those of you who don't know me, let me share a little bit about who I am. It's almost like a lounge singer. Hey, let's talk about myself for just a minute. But let's do that. I'm a professor at St. Louis Christian College in Florissant, Missouri, and have been there since 2004, so I've been teaching there 11 years. Before that, I was actually a worship pastor in Northern Illinois, and loved doing that, and then moved into teaching more in that area. What I currently do now is I direct our online programs, and I also teach courses related to arts, guitar, worship tech, worship theology, worship leading, creative writing and publishing, and also a class on film, which is one of my favorite classes to teach. I'm the author of 2 books. The first book that I wrote was called 30 Days of Evernote for Churches, and that was basically a 30-day guide for ministry leaders on how to use the Evernote app, which I'm a huge fan of. In fact, when we first started thinking about doing this course, this has been, gosh, almost a year ago. It was early last summer or late last spring, I forget which one. But I approached my administrators at St. Louis Christian College, and I said, hey, I've got this idea for maybe a course or two that it would be free for church leaders, and it would be on topics that are super practical and would really be helpful. And, of course, this topic of self-publishing was one that we talked about. But also, another topic that seemed very popular was productivity. So we picked this one, and if we do this again, we may go the productivity route. So we'll see there. I'm seeing a chat here. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, Mont, I see your 630 area code. Very cool. Thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. And also, by the way, for all of you who may have jumped on here a little bit past 7 or so, thanks for joining us. Welcome. I'm so glad you've taken the time to join me on this call. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, because I know that as a ministry leader, you are super busy and super committed. So, man, it just really means the world to me that you would be on this call tonight. And by the way, I don't know what that... Okay, I think that's somebody joining. I think that's what that noise is. Okay. So anyway, I'm the author of 2 books. The first one was an Evernote guide. The second one came out last year. This is a self-published book called The Artist's Suitcase, 26 Essentials for the Creative Journey. And that was very much a learning process for me, and I'm really excited to be able to share some of that with you over the course of these next few weeks. And then finally, I'm the lead editor for, not the lead editor, but I'm one of the lead editors for the Good Men Project. Now, on this call tonight, in this course, you all are ministry leaders, so obviously we're all in agreement that, you know, we care about the mission of Christ, we care about God's Word, we want to share the gospel with people. You know, we're very united on all those things. Now, if you look at the site Good Men Project, it's goodmenproject.com, you'll very quickly see that's not a Christian site by any stretch. That's okay, because that is sort of my way of developing relationships with people who are outside the church and learning some editing skills, which have been so helpful to me, and just kind of doing something that's outside the Christian bubble. And I'll tell you what, I've loved every second of it. It's been really great. But if you look on there, you'll see there are a lot of things that, you know, are not at all related to the Christian faith or church or the Bible or anything like that. And honestly, I've got to tell you, it's been really refreshing to be part of something that's not like a strictly a church thing or a Christian college thing. And I've really enjoyed just being a part of that, and just kind of getting to share my faith as it comes up, and do that in some interesting ways, and it's been a lot of fun. So anyway, those are some things about me that you may or may not be interested in, but just kind of so you know who I am, that gives you a little bit of an idea. Let's go on here. Let's talk for a second about why write a book in the first place? So this is a self-publishing course, but I think we have to back up a little bit and ask the question, why really do we want to write a book? And I want to share with you 7 reasons why I think writing a book is a really, really fantastic idea. Now, blogging is great. Writing for websites and magazines is great. But there's something different about writing a book. Now, it doesn't matter if the book is long or short, or if it's an academic book or a kid's book or whatever it is. Just the idea of writing an actual book is kind of like a milestone sort of a thing. It's kind of like, you can write blog posts, you can write articles, but when you write a book, that requires typically a higher level of commitment and more effort. So there's kind of something special about that. And that's what I want to gear this toward tonight here. So why write a book? There are 3 ways that writing impacts you and 4 ways that it impacts other people. Let's start with how writing impacts you. The first way is that writing a book can help you grow. And that is so true because just the process of writing a book, going through the steps to organize your thoughts, to sit down, as I've told some of my students before, just the fact of planning your behind in that chair and writing the book, having the cover designed, having it edited, going through the whole process of doing that in itself causes you to grow because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So I think writing a book can definitely help you grow as a person and as a writer. Number 2, writing a book can give you clarity. What I mean by this is that just in the process of writing a book, that gives you clarity about what you're writing about. I think anytime that you want to find out what you think about something, really all you have to do is write about it. And that process helps you to kind of discover your thoughts and really clarify your thinking on a process. And man, if you're a teacher or a preacher, you know that process very intimately because you're doing it constantly. And just the process of outlining your thoughts, writing them down, can really help you in some important ways. Whoops, sorry, I switched my slides there. The number 3, writing a book can boost your confidence. And I will tell you just from firsthand experience, writing a book has given me a huge boost of confidence. For instance, I had someone come to St. Louis Christian College. This has been a few months ago, right after I did my book launch for The Artist Suitcase. In fact, it was an area pastor, and he was hanging out at the college that day for some other things, but he came into my class and said, "Hey, I heard he didn't come into my class in the middle of it, but just before class. And he said, "Hey, I saw your book. Do you have any extra copies here?" And I said, "Yes, definitely. I've got some print copies here." And he said, "I want to buy 10 of them." And it just blew my mind because I thought, wow, this is so cool. And yeah, I mean, I made a little bit of money off of it. It wasn't anything super substantial, but just the fact that someone that I respected came to me and said, "Hey, I would like to buy your book so my staff can go through it," it just completely blew me away. And I was on cloud 9 for the whole rest of that week just because of that. So the process of writing a book really can give you a huge confidence boost because you know that you can do it. You can conquer a big goal and you can take it piece by piece and you can climb that mountain if you really set your mind to it. So those are 3 ways that writing impacts you. Now, what about how writing can impact other people? There are 4 specific ways I want to highlight here. Number 1 is that a book helps establish your authority. Now, let me share with you kind of I'm not going to call it a dirty little secret of writing. I guess it kind of is in a way, but it's just kind of a unique perk, I guess, of being an author, is that just by virtue of you having written a book and having it for sale, either as an ebook on Amazon or an audiobook on Audible or having a print book, just by virtue of you having that, in a way, establishes you as an authority on that topic. And you can ask anybody who's written a book, and I think they'll probably be inclined to agree with that. And that's because we perceive a person who writes a book as an authority on that topic since they've done the research, they've gone to the trouble of writing the book, and so forth. So that's really kind of a neat thing. Just by virtue of you having a book out there on some topic, automatically will make people think, hey, they must know what they're talking about. Now, if you've ever read any books, which all of us have, we know for sure that just because you write a book on something doesn't really mean you know what you're talking about. However, the general perception is that if you have a book on something, people are going to tend to give you a little bit more credibility. on that topic, which is kind of a nice thing. Number 2, a book can expand your audience. And the cool thing about writing books is that those books can go places that you will never, ever go. And especially in today's world where you can have your books on Amazon, you can have your books in bookstores, you can sell them at conferences, you can give them away to people. That's a really, really cool thing because you can impact people that you'll never meet or never have a chance to visit in person. And that's a great thing. Number 3, a book can bring you income. Now, I understand that this is a group that's focused on self-publishing for ministry professionals. And sometimes in the ministry world, we feel a little bit weird about talking about income and money and that kind of a thing. But the reality is that writing, if you approach it like one, actually is a business. And I think there is a lot to be said for not just thinking of it as a ministry, but also thinking of it in a business sense. I know sometimes it's awkward sort of putting those two things together, but the fact of the matter is that a book can bring you income. In fact, case in point, just today I got a monthly email from ACX, which is the arm of Amazon.com that publishes audiobooks to Audible.com. And every month I get a statement from, basically a royalty statement from ACX. I also get one from Amazon, and I also get one from CreateSpace, which is the print version of Amazon, the self-publishing print arm, so to speak. And so today I just got that statement, hey, your royalty statement is ready from ACX. And I got to tell you, it's really cool to get those emails to say, hey, you've got money that we want to give to you. Now, don't be too impressed by that because it's not very much, and I might be able to go out to eat on it if I don't go somewhere that's very expensive. But the fact of the matter is that I love getting those statements, and that's kind of a cool thing. And who among us couldn't use a few more bucks? And number 4, a book can outlive you and create a legacy. And I think of all the reasons to write a book, this to me might be the most powerful one, because the fact of the matter is that all of us one day are going to be gone. And in 100 years, none of us probably are going to be around. But what about our lives are we going to leave behind that other people can know about? What are we going to leave for the people who come after us that will share our stories with them? What are you going to leave behind where people can experience that and go, wow, this is what that person really loved. This is what was important to that person. I think about my son and my future grandkids. How are they going to know who I was as a person? Now, of course, my son knows me, but what about his kids and then his grandkids and his great-grandkids? How are they going to know me as a person? Well, a great way is that I can put anything that I want down in writing, whether it's thoughts about God or church or ministry or a fiction book or just my thoughts on whatever topic. That's a way that I can leave something for those who come behind me. And I think that's a great reason to write a book. So let's stop here for just a moment. And I want you to do a quick exercise. Hopefully you've got a pen and paper here. And I want you to think about these reasons that I've just mentioned for writing a book. And ask yourself, which of these reasons to write a book do you relate to the most? And let's take about a minute to write down 2 or 3 of these. So to review, writing a book can help you to grow. Writing a book can bring you clarity. It can also bring you confidence. Writing a book can help establish your authority. Writing a book can expand your audience. It can bring you income, and it can leave a legacy for you. So take maybe 30 or 60 seconds, think about those, and which 2 or 3 of those you relate to the most. And I'm going to grab a quick drink while you're doing that. Okay, hopefully that's given you a chance to think about those really briefly. The truth is that I like all those things, and hopefully all those things are something that appeal to you as well, or at least a few of them. Also think about how could each one of those benefit you, your family, or your ministry. And probably several of those could benefit several of those areas in your life in some pretty amazing ways. All right, let's move on to the next thing here. Let's talk about self-publishing for a second. So we've established some reasons to write a book, but now then what do you do with that book? That's kind of the question, isn't it? You know, you've written a manuscript or you want to write a manuscript, then what do you actually do with it? In fact, I was talking to somebody about this recently, and they said, well, I've got this thing written, but you know, where do I go from here? And this is kind of a key decision, because what determines where you go from here depends on what your goals are as a writer. Now, there are two main ways to publish a book. There's actually a third way, which I'll mention that briefly in passing here in a second, but the two main ways that we want to look at are traditional publishing and self-publishing. And I've still got that beeping thing going on. Must be a gremlin in the system or something. Okay, it's all good. So there's traditional publishing and self-publishing. Now, the truth is that there is also a third way, and that is called assisted self-publishing. It's known by different terms, but the basic idea is that instead of traditional publishing, where a publisher pays you for your book, and then you get royalties, then they sell your book, it's kind of the reverse idea, where you pay a publisher to publish your book. So with a traditional publisher, you have to go through an agent typically, and they will, they may approve your book or reject your book and send you a contract and all that stuff. But with assisted self-publishing, basically you're paying a company to handle the cover design, the editing, and some of the marketing and that kind of stuff. For sake of simplicity, we're just going to focus on traditional and self-publishing. Now, here's the deal, is that, whoops, sorry about that. My bad. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I'm giving everybody, PowerPoint whiplash. Just keep in mind that self-publishing and traditional publishing, neither is right or wrong. Your approach really depends on your goals. So let's jump in here. First of all, let's take a look at traditional publishing. Now, I'm greatly simplifying this whole process, just kind of for the sake of simplicity, but I think this pretty well sums up the pros and cons of traditional publishing. First of all, let's look at the pros of traditional publishing. One pro is that typically there's more prestige that we give to authors who are traditionally published. You go into a Barnes & Noble, you see a really nicely published book there. It's got a great cover. It's on the shelf. It looks nice. So that's kind of a prestigious deal. And that's for good reason, because publishers, they don't select everybody to be published. They only select ones that they think are going to sell, or that kind of fit their criteria and their publishing goals and all that stuff. So there's an element where not everybody gets in the door of a traditional publisher. So that is kind of a prestige thing. Also, traditional publishers are experts at creating books. I mean, let's face it, these are the ultimate pros in the world of creating a nice-looking book. So they're very, very good at what they do. Third of all, traditional publishers have access to retail distribution. What that means is that when you go to, let's say, a bookstore like Barnes & Noble, or another type of chain bookstore, or even a Walmart or other type of retail places, your book could be in that store. Now, the catch, though, is that just because you have a traditionally published book doesn't necessarily mean your book is going to be in that store. I know my wife, she just left her job at Barnes & Noble after about 10 years of being there a few months ago. And it was so funny, because oftentimes she would just come home and tell me stories about customers who were upset because they were looking for this one really arcane book, but they didn't have it in stock there. So there's kind of this common misconception that Barnes & Noble carries every book that's ever been published, which is crazy to think about. So just keep in mind that just because a book is traditionally published doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be in a store where people go to. However, traditional publishers do have access to retail distribution, so if it's not on a shelf, somebody can go in and order it from a publisher's backlist. Then number 4, traditional publishing comes with automatic respect. If you are a person who's been published traditionally, that automatically comes with some respect attached to it, which is a pretty cool thing. Excuse me. Now, what about the cons of traditional publishing? Well, there are some drawbacks, just as there are some pros and cons to self-publishing, which we'll get to here in a second. There are 4 specifically that I want to mention. The first drawback of traditional publishing, is that you do need an agent most of the time. Not always, but I would say it's pretty hard to be traditionally published today without having an agent of some kind. And an agent basically is a go-between between the author and the publisher. And the vast majority of traditional publishers are not going to accept a manuscript from an author who is not going through an agent, because an agent kind of like filters those and they negotiate contract terms and all that kind of good stuff. Secondly, traditional publishing takes about 1 to 2 years from start to finish, and that involves finding an agent, preparing a book proposal, shopping for a publisher, editing and cover design, marketing, and that whole process. So traditional publishing most of the time is sort of a long process. Again, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon with traditional publishing. It does take a while. Also with traditional publishing, you are usually going to have a smaller royalty. That's because the publisher naturally is going to take a cut of your book sales. So is the retail establishment and so forth. So your royalties are probably going to be a little smaller. Then finally, another drawback of traditional publishing is that you don't own the material. For instance, you can't just take your book and use that material somewhere else and copy it if you want to, or use it as the basis for an online course or something like that, because technically you don't own the copyright to that material. So I think that's kind of a drawback. To many other people, it doesn't really matter, but to me, that's a drawback. Now let's move on to self-publishing. Let me grab a drink here really quick. There are some pros and cons to self-publishing. Let's look at the pros first. One pro is that you can publish something very quickly in self-publishing. In fact, if you have something ready to go, all you have to do, if it's ready to go, is upload it to CreateSpace, which is the self-publishing print version of Amazon. You can upload it there. You can have it for sale within a few days on Amazon. I mean, it's that fast if you have all the work already done. Number two, you can control everything about the book from start to finish when it's self-published. So you get 100% control over the cover design, how it's edited, how it's formatted, what kind of paper you're going to have on the cover, whether it's like a matte finish or a glossy finish. You get to decide the physical size of the book. You decide everything about the book from start to finish. Number three, another pro of self-publishing is that you own the material and you can use it any way that you want. For instance, if you want to, say, start a conference based on your book, you could do that. If you want to use the book as a basis for a course, you can do that. If you want to give the material away, you can totally do that because it's yours. The number four, with self-publishing, there is definitely going to be a bigger royalty involved. Now, make no mistake, Amazon definitely is going to take a cut if you sell it through Amazon, but you're probably going to get more from self-publishing than you would through traditional publishing. So let's look at some cons of self-publishing, because it's not all roses and rainbows. Is that the phrase? Roses and is that even a phrase? I have no idea. Anyway, it's not all good stuff. There are some challenges to self-publishing. Let's look at 4 of these specifically. This is under the con column. Number 1, with self-publishing, you are responsible for all the aspects of book creation. For instance, cover, editing, marketing, etc. You're responsible for the whole kit and caboodle. And that can be a good thing, or that can be kind of a challenging thing depending on whether you like doing that stuff. But you're responsible for the whole shebang. Number 2 is that with self-publishing, there's definitely lots more work. And I can tell you this from experience, it takes way more time to edit a book than you think it's going to take. In fact, last summer when I finished my artist suitcase book, it's not a long book, it's like 120 pages. So this isn't like a big, massive novel or something. So I got it done, I sent it off to my editor who I paid to edit for me, and I was absolutely shocked at all the mistakes that were in it. And I think of myself as a pretty decent person when it comes to grammar, punctuation, But my goodness, I was absolutely blown away about all the mistakes in it. And I sent it around to 5 or 6 other people to read it too, and they all pointed out tons and tons of errors in it. And the funny thing is that they didn't even all point out the same ones. That's, one person would point out sort of this group of errors, somebody else would point out other errors. Some of those overlapped, but some of them didn't. And that just goes to show you that it's really, really hard to catch all the errors in a book. But whenever you're self-publishing, you've got to take care of that stuff yourself. You can't just rely on the publisher to ferret out all those mistakes and whatnot. Another con with self-publishing is that it requires an upfront investment for editing and cover design. And if you want to spend any money on marketing, it'll require that too. And then number 4, it does require a learning curve for sure. Now myself, I like technical processes. I'm sort of challenged by that. So I enjoy that process, but make no mistake, there is definitely a learning curve if you want to do self-publishing the right way. So with all that said, now that we've talked for a second about the differences between traditional publishing and self-publishing, why would you self-publish? Why is it that I'm recommending that we think about going that way? Well, I really think that for most authors, self-publishing is a great option. And here's why. There's really 3 main reasons. Number 1 is that you can get your book out there and available more quickly, much more quickly, in fact. Number 2, it's a great learning process. Now, if you don't like learning those kind of processes or you get very frustrated by those kind of things, that's probably not going to be something that's appealing to you. But if you like learning those things and you like being in control of your writing project, then I think that's a good thing. And then number 3, you have complete control of your book, which I think is a very good thing. So here's a quick exercise for us to think about. Think about your goals for writing and publishing. What kind of things do you see yourself accomplishing with it? Maybe take a couple seconds and write down 1 or 2 or 3 goals on a piece of paper that you have for writing. I'll give you just a little bit to do that. So given those goals for your writing and your publishing goals, would traditional publishing or self-publishing be a better fit for you? That's definitely something to think about. Honestly, I think for most people, self-publishing is an attractive option because you don't have to take the time to try and find an agent and go through that whole process. You can do it much more quickly. But I will also say, for some people, traditional publishing is a great option as well. So the cool thing is I don't think we have to choose between one or the other. There are many, many authors who traditionally publish some stuff, but they self-publish other stuff. In fact, I think most authors, who have been in this a while or they've made a name for themselves, most of those people, I think, have done both types of publishing. Not everybody, of course, but there are a lot that I know of. Let's go to the next section here. So we've talked about several things. Why write a book? Several reasons to do that. Why self-publish, and why self-publishing is, I think, an attractive option for most people who are sort of beginning this writing and publishing journey. And then this might be the most important thing that we think about the whole first session is how to discover your why as a writer. Here's the reason that I want us to think through this a little bit, is that if you don't understand your why as a writer, everything else is way, way harder. For instance, if you're not really clear on why you're writing and what you hope to accomplish through your writing, then it's going to be much harder to make decisions about, for instance, whether to go with a traditional publisher or whether to self-publish. It's going to be way harder to know how to market your books or how you're going to promote them or even what stuff you're going to write about. So you first have to understand what your purpose is as a writer before you can then, I think, move on, because it'll be way, way harder if you don't have a why or a purpose that's driving that whole process, if that makes sense. So the number 2 bullet point on here is very, very key. Your writing must be connected to your overall life purpose. Now, not everybody would agree with me on this because many people just see writing as a hobby or even as a full-time job that's not really connected to something that's deeply meaningful to them. I don't really buy into that philosophy for myself because for me, writing should be connected to some deep purpose that you have for your life. The reason I say that is because writing is such a time-consuming thing. It's so intensive, I believe, that for me it has to be connected to my overall life purpose. And part of that also is that, and I know you all relate to this, part of that is the fact that I feel called to this, and we feel God's calling on our lives. You know, we want to fulfill the things that we believe God is asking us to do. And for me, writing is a huge part of that. Now, for you, it may not be a huge part of that. It may just be something you want to pursue as something fun to do or as a hobby or whatever. But for me, I think the most heartfelt writing comes when it's connected to our overall life purpose. Because then, and only then, do we have a really intense purpose or a why driving that process. Now, when it comes to our creative lives, I think that our life purpose is the most powerful creative tool that we have at our disposal. Again, when we have that drive, when we have that purpose that's propelling us on and compelling us to do something greater than just involves ourselves, when we have something that's calling us to a greater purpose in life, man, that's when we are at our creative best, I think, because we feel a deeper need than just, I'm just going to write something or I'm just going to create something that's just sort of fun and meaningless. No, it's like, man, I'm got this drive within me. I feel God's call within me to do something significant, and I really want to make a difference through my writing. And I think that compels us to greater depths of creativity. So, that being said, how do we discover our life purpose? How do we go about that process? And, maybe discover isn't even the best word. Maybe the best word is uncover, because it's not like we just wake up one day and go, oh, okay, hang on one second here. We've got somebody I need to mute here. Okay, there we go. It's not as if one day we're just walking around in the backyard and go, oh, man, I stumbled over something. What was that? Oh, that was my life purpose. I don't think it's something that we just discover. I think it's something that rather we uncover over time. And I'll talk about how we kind of go through that process. Let me share some thoughts on this. One thing before I share kind of my really specific life purpose, let me share this. I don't think that we discover it or uncover it in one single kind of aha moment. I think there are moments in life where we have some flashes of insight into that process, but as a rule, I don't think, we wake up one day and we go, man, up till this moment I haven't been living with purpose, and now today I had this huge flash of insight, and now I'm going to live with this passionate purpose from here on out. I don't think it works like that at all. And probably when you think about your life experience, you would agree with that it's really something that kind of unfolds piece by piece and bit by bit over the years and over time. I think we uncover our vocational purpose over time through trial and error and success and failure. And sometimes it's the trials and failures that teach us the most rather than our successes and all the things that are going well for us. And I think that we gain clarity on our purpose whenever we're serving and connecting with others and creating art, not before that process. In other words, we can't wait to do something until we feel like, oh, here's my purpose, now I can start serving others. Or now I can start engaging with others in community and connecting with them. Now I can start creating art or writing. Now that I know what my purpose is and I'm clear about that. No, I think it's actually the opposite. I think we have to do things and find out what we love. We have to do things to discover what we're good at and what our strengths are. And it's through that process, that very, very messy process, that very imperfect process, it's through all that we gain clarity on our vocational purpose in life, and we uncover that bit by bit. I hope that makes sense, and I hope you see where I'm going with that. I know that's certainly true of myself. Just a quick story that kind of illustrates this whole process. I remember several years ago, I was advising a student at St. Louis Christian College. He was in our worship and music program, And he had taken a ministry at a small church not too far from our college. He had taken a youth ministry at this church, and it was a small church, and he, had, I think, 15 or 20 kids in the youth group. And, so it wasn't like this big, massive program. But for 2 years, he drove every weekend to serve at this church as the youth minister. And let me grab a drink real quick. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that. So he was driving every weekend for a couple of years to this church. One day we were talking in my office, and he said, I've got to be honest with you, and this kid was not usually like really, really gut level honest. It was unlike him to just sort of admit that he was really struggling. So he said, you know what, I feel like a failure. I really honestly feel like a big, massive failure because I've spent 2 years serving in this as the youth pastor in this youth ministry, and I've not enjoyed it at all. It's not going well. I don't like it. I don't like this type of ministry. It's not me. And I feel like literally I've wasted 2 years of my life. And my heart just broke for this guy, and I said, oh, man, I just don't see it that way at all. What I see is that you gained some really valuable experience serving in a ministry position, in a leadership position. And I said, but just as important, you've discovered something that you don't like to do. You've discovered something that doesn't really light your fire and get you excited. And that's totally okay because you've learned some things in the process. And I think sometimes whenever we feel like we fail at something and whenever things aren't going well and whenever we're not like on top, so to speak, those are the times when we have a lot of clarity because we find out, man, I don't enjoy that type of role or that specific type of ministry, or I don't enjoy this type of work or whatever. And those moments can give us a lot of clarity because it's like it's a closed door. And sometimes those closed doors are really, really wonderful. We don't see it at the time, but they're wonderful because then we're forced to turn and find an open door. And it's only when a door is closed that we can then turn and see the great door that's open, maybe just a few doors down. And we walk through that door and we go, man, I'm so thankful for all those closed doors because now I can walk through this open door. And it's exactly where I wanted to go. So I mention that because I don't want you to be discouraged by things that aren't going well in your life, by things that you feel like, oh gosh, this isn't quite right, this just isn't lining up. My life isn't really the way I want it. Things are messy and bumpy and crazy at the moment. That's totally okay because you'll get there, and life happens in the process of creating art. And it's in the mess, it's in those moments that I think we find a lot of clarity. And we discover a lot of things about ourselves, even when things aren't going so well. Well, let's move on. This is turning into a sermon, but that's just who I am, I guess. Let me share with you what I believe is my life purpose. It is this: I help people unlock their God-given and creative potential so they can serve with passion and purpose. And that sounds like a mouthful, I understand, but let me break this down a little bit for you because I think this may help some of you. Hold on a second. We got somebody I need to mute. Okay. Sorry, I keep having to do this. This thing is kind of goofy here. So here, let me break this down for you a little bit. My life purpose: I help people unlock their God-given creative potential so they can serve with passion and purpose. The first thing is that it's all about people. It's all about others. I help people. I don't just want to help myself. I want to help people. Number two, I help people unlock something. And when I talk about unlocking their potential, I believe that there are barriers, there are obstacles, there are sometimes very self-limiting beliefs that we have that block us from living up to our potential. And I want to help people unlock those things. I believe that I'm helping them unlock, or I'm trying to help people unlock their God-given creative potential. And I say that because everybody has creative gifts. So when I look at somebody who doesn't feel very creative at all, they kind of feel like a failure, I go, man, you've got some awesome creative gifts. It's just kind of our job to help them discover what those are and to help them start serving in their sweet spot because everybody has creative gifts. And I want to help them unlock their creative potential. Again, everybody has creative gifts. Everybody has potential. And I want to help them serve with passion and with purpose because that's really the ultimate goal, isn't it? We want people to not serve half-heartedly or serve with, sort of reluctance. We want to help them do it with passion and with purpose. That's my life purpose. And I know it sounds kind of like a simple statement, but that really literally took me years to really land on that. As I thought through the whole process and what am I really doing, and where do I feel like God's leading me, and what direction am I going? I've landed on that, and I try to filter everything that I do, job-wise or vocationally or commitment-wise, through that filter of helping people unlock their creative potential. And that's really, really helpful because that helps me to know what to say yes to and also what to say no to. Let me go to the next slide here. So this may sound a little bit silly, and I don't mean it to sound so simplistic or even like businessy, but I think this might be helpful. This is kind of a template for thinking through your life purpose. And even saying that, here's a template for your life purpose, I don't mean it to sound so like cut and dried, because I don't think it is, but this might be helpful. One way that you can think through this is, I help blank, which is a group of people, do some type of action so they can result. So it's, I help these people do something so they can have this type of result. So I believe your life purpose should be oriented toward helping or serving other people. That could be, all people, I suppose, but I think it's really helpful to choose kind of a specific group and to see who God's leading you to serve. For instance, I've got a really good friend who is getting ready to move to Africa to be part of a business as mission kind of a deal. And his family's passion is to help the people in that particular geographic area. Number 2, I believe your life purpose should be action-oriented. What do you want to help people do? I mean, you don't want to help them just to sit around, on their hands. You want to help them to do something active. What is the result that you're trying to help people accomplish? And then number 3, of course, it should be focused on those results. What is the ultimate aim you're trying to help people do? Just something to think about. It may take some time to kind of think through that, but my guess is that you already have some clues as to what this purpose is. Sometimes it just takes a little while to sit down and kind of refine it and to think through it. Well, let me begin to wrap this up tonight by just sharing 10 questions to help you discover your purpose. Now, again, these are not the end-all, be-all of anything. I think there's a lot of things that go into this whole process. Certainly some of it is mysterious, and it should be mysterious, because life is not all cut and dried. I think it shouldn't be like an 1, 2, 3, XYZ thing. It ought to be something that's a little mysterious sometimes, that we feel like God's leading us to do some things, and maybe we don't always totally understand it. That's the way that I hope life is, and I think life is. At the same time, I think it does help to have a lot of clarity as well. And these questions will help you to think through that process and give you some clarity. Let me walk you through these 10 questions. Number 1 is, what are your creative gifts? Now, some people will say, well, I'm not really talented, I'm not really creative. But I don't buy that at all, because everybody has creative gifts. And I think of creativity in a pretty broad way. For instance, the guy out there in his garage who's rebuilding engines. Man, that is a creative gift. That is a highly creative, analytical, thoughtful gift that can, take apart an engine and put it back together. It's a gift that I respect because I don't really have that gift in the least. But what are your creative gifts? What do you enjoy doing? What do you like creating or making? Number 2, what do you enjoy doing? And this is different than number 1 because number 2 is a very, very simple question. What do you like doing? And the way that you tell if you enjoy doing something is if you look forward to it. If you say, man, I can't wait till Saturday. I can go work in the yard and plant flowers. Or, man, I can't wait till Sunday afternoon when I can sit back and really, really read a good book or watch a great movie. Those things are helpful because they can clue you in as to what your passion and purpose in life is all about. Number 3, if money were not a factor, what kind of job would you have? Good question. Number 4, what kind of books do you read? This is a good hint, I think, to our vocational purpose in life, because the kind of books that you're drawn to tell you something about yourself. They tell you something about your heart and what you're interested in and what your passions are. Number 5, what is your favorite movie? Now, this might seem like a very odd question because when we talk to people about what our favorite movies are, sometimes that seems like a very superficial kind of a thing. Like, well, why would it matter if whatever movie is your favorite movie? Well, the reason that that's a very important question is because when you watch a movie, when you listen to music or engage in any kind of art, that sort of bypasses the logical part of us to a degree, and it gets straight to our emotional self. It gets straight to our heart, if you will. And when you think about what your favorite movie is, I think that tells you something about your own heart. I think it tells you something about how you're wired up and what kinds of things speak to your emotions. Let me give you an example. My favorite movie of all time is It's a Wonderful Life, the Christmas movie that comes on every year. And it's about George Bailey, and he feels like a failure, and he comes to find out he's really not a failure. He has all these friends in life, and it's just a movie that I love, and for whatever reason, it really, really speaks to me, and that's my favorite movie. And I think that tells me something about myself. And when you think about your favorite movie, what does it tell you about yourself? Number 5, what times in your life have been the happiest? What times in your life have been the happiest? This can be an important question because when you think back to when you were happiest, that tells you kind of what makes your heart beat. It tells you what brings you joy in life. Maybe it was a particular situation. Maybe it was a particular job situation, or even living in a particular area, or serving in a particular kind of role. Sometimes in the Christian community, we tend to downplay happiness, as if being happy is a bad thing, and we say, well, happiness is superficial and short-lived, and joy is what we really should shoot for. And I don't disagree with that sentiment, but I think there is something to be said for just, it's okay to just be happy. That's not something we should, go out and seek, like, I'm not going to do this because it won't make me happy. That's not what I mean at all. But I do mean that when something gives you a lot of joy in life, when it just brings you happiness and makes you smile, it's important to pay attention to that, because I don't think we were meant to just walk around, with frowns on our faces all the time. Christ was joyful. Man, we've got the joy of the Lord, so, we should definitely be thinking about what things bring joy to us and to others. What things make us happy and make our spirits light and make life really, really fun. Those are important things. Number 6, what makes you cry? This is on the other end of the spectrum. When you think about things that make you cry, that's a clue to things that you really, really care about. Things that are really important to you. Things that are soft spots in your heart. Number 7, what makes your heart sing? When you think about, almost going back to number 5, when you think about what things give you an immense amount of joy, what things just make your heart sing and they make you go, wow, life is worth living. I can't fathom being on a higher mountaintop right now because of this thing or that person or this situation or this result. Those are clues to, I think, what's in our hearts and kind of how God has wired us up a bit. Number 8, what are you known for? It just occurred to me I've got these misnumbered. This should have started at 6 on this slide, not 5. My bad. So actually this is number 9. What are you known for? So what things do people know you for? For instance, they might say, hey, this person over here, Jane, is really, really good at music. She's a great piano player. She's a great vocalist. She's very artistic. The things that people know you for probably are an indication of how you're wired up and what you're passionate about and some type of direction that God has for your life. Not always necessarily, but I think it is a question worth asking and paying attention to. And then finally, who are your heroes? What people do you really, really admire? What people do you read biographies about? Who are the heroes or the icons that you like to talk about and study about and learn about? And the reason that's a good question is because when you look at the people you really, really admire, that's telling you something about the kind of person that you aspire to be. It doesn't mean that we want to totally be like that person, because everybody's flawed and sinful and imperfect, but yet when you look around the world, there are a lot of people who have great qualities worth imitating in our own lives. So I think that's a good question worth asking. Okay, as we think through all these things, as I think about those questions, And as I've kind of gone through this process with you tonight, let me share with you 5 reasons why I personally write. And you may not relate to all of these, but I think this will help give you some ideas about some things maybe you would want to think about in your own life. And I'm hoping that you'll, in the next week, go through and make your own list. Number 1, I like the creative process of writing and discovery. I love that process. Number 2, I like the results that writing brings. Influence, authority, helping other people, some income, the opportunities that writing brings you. I like all that stuff. And I'll be honest, writing is hard work. It's, in fact, the hardest work that I know. But I do it because I like the process, and I also like the results that it brings. Number 3, I like learning about myself and the world through writing. Writing is the way that I discover things about myself, and one of the ways I discover the world. Number 4, I want to leave something behind after I'm gone. I want to leave a legacy and hopefully leave something written about my life, other than just my obituary or my tombstone. I want to leave something behind that's a legacy. And then number 5, I have a message that I want to share. My guess is that you do as well. And writing is a really great way to share that message because your writing will go places that you can never go. I think that's really, really valuable. Okay, here are some action steps. You might call this homework for next week. Number 1 is, if you haven't already, join the Facebook group. And I mentioned the link on that at the beginning. Introduce yourself and share 2 or 3 reasons why you want to write and to self-publish. So, again, I'm going to say it again. This is going to be a lot more valuable if you jump in the Facebook group and get engaged in that. Number 2, these 2 or 3 reasons that you want to write, post those reasons somewhere where you can see them whenever you write. It might be a Post-it note or a bulletin board or in your wallet or your computer screen or whatever, but put these up where you can see them because that'll motivate you in your writing. And then sometime in the next week, write out your answers to those 10 questions that'll help you discover your life purpose. I think going through those questions will really help you to gain some clarity on what it is that your life is all about, and that'll filter into your writing as well. All right, folks, that's basically it for this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about the topic of audience. In other words, how to shape your content for a specific group of people. Now, I know we're all in ministry, roles. We're ministry professionals, and the gospel is for everyone. That's true. However, when it comes to your writing, you cannot write for everyone because if you do, you're not going to write for anyone, if that makes sense. So what you have to do is you have to be specific about the people that you're writing for. You got to choose a group of people or even a specific type of a person to write to. That'll give your writing an edge. It'll make it very personal and really help you a lot. We'll talk about that process we'll talk about it next week, going back in time. Let me share with you a couple quick things here. While I'm doing this. So make sure and go here. Go to kentsanders.net/self-pub-course. And it's going to bring up a page that looks like this. And it's going to be password protected. And you're going to need to put in this password, self, S-E-L-F, pub, P-U-B, 2016, self-pub 2016. And that's going to bring up a page that looks like this. And this is where I'm going to put the replays. So the video replay of this session will be available in a day or 2 once I get that uploaded and edited and all that stuff. Here you can download the PowerPoint slides that I've used tonight. You can download a PDF of the PowerPoint slides. And you can also download a PDF of these 10 questions to help you discover your purpose. And it will look like this. you can just go through here and go through that process. Well, folks, that is pretty much it for tonight. That's all I've got. I look forward to seeing you in the Facebook group. Once again, thank you so much for being on this call. I really appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing you next week. Have a good evening. Thanks. Good night.